Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gaurav Bhatia, Associate Director from Risk Advisory Team of ASA and Associates. I would like to welcome you to our Road to Recovery series of panel discussions. We expect our future actions to be impacted by our learnings from this crisis, and these would play out as we set out to achieve accelerated recovery as well as build stronger barriers against future risk. Today is the third of our five-part series where we cover business continuity, risk management. Our panelists will bring to bear their experience to deliberate upon business continuity and managing the risk of frauds with limited physical controls in place. A little bit about ASA and Associates and our guest today. ASA and Associates is a 30-year-old accounting and consulting firm with a team of over 700 professionals spread across 8 offices in India, besides a well-oiled network of national and international affiliations. We work with our clients, many from overseas, to help them set up offices and factories in India, find partners, take care of their taxation, audit, accounting, business support requirements, GST advisory, risk advisory services, and help with restructuring and liquidations as well. Chairing this session is Richard Reiki. He's presently a board member of KPMG Dubai and is the former CEO of KPMG in India, where he was a member of the global board and the council of KPMG International. With over 37 years plus experience in consulting and professional services, Richard has worked in Arthur Andersen, Ernst & Young, and KPMG, where he has spearheaded the firm in various capacities. He's a qualified chartered accountant in India, skilled in enterprise risk management, business process reengineering, internal audits, accounting, and customer relationship management. Richard is a mentor and angel investor, also mentoring the startups and young professionals in consulting. Our first panelist today is Anand Prasad, founder of APN Partners. Anand is a corporate lawyer with more than 25 years of experience representing both domestic and international clients on a variety of legal and commercial issues within and outside India. He has represented clients in various Indian courts and arbitration proceedings, including on shareholder disputes and issues of corporate fraud and other white-collared crimes. He is the former founding partner of Trilegal. Our second panelist for today is Ivan Valkunde, CFO Airbus India. With an experience of more than 20 years, Ivan came to India in 2019 as the CFO of Airbus India. In his previous engagements, he worked as the CFO of EADS PZL, Airbus military subsidiary in Poland. Airbus is a global leader in aeronautics, space related services. Airbus has built on its strong European heritage to become truly international, with around 180 locations and 12,000 plus direct suppliers globally. Our third panelist for today is Nikhil Mehrotra, VP and Global Head, Financial Assurance, Corporate Audit, Bharti Group. Nikhil has 19 plus years of experience in the areas of internal audits, enterprise risk management, operational and financial control reviews, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, and business process improvements. Bharti Enterprises is one of the India's leading business group with diversified interest in telecom, financial services, real estate, hospitality, agriculture, and food. The company, in fact, ranked amongst the top 3 mobile service providers globally in terms of subscribers. And our final panelist for today is Keyur Dave, partner of Assurance and practice head Mumbai from ASA and Associates. Keyur is a chartered accountant with close to 20 years experience in audit and advisory, including IFRS, Ind AS, Indian GAAP, across industry and consulting. Keyur assisted many large listed companies in their transition to Ind AS and has supported various companies on technical aspects by issuing accounting opinions. He is a member of the CII National Committee on Financial Reporting. He has also been a part of the Ind AS Transition Facilitation Group, the Ind AS Implementation Committee, and the Accounting Standard Board of ICI. So before we begin, here are a few instructions for the webinar. Please note that all the participants will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the question section in the chat. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A round. A link with the recording to this webinar will be emailed to you by tomorrow. Also note that each of these webinars have a separate link that will be emailed to you on the day of the webinar. Kindly reach out to us if you have any difficulty with this. Thank you all, and over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Gaurav, and good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to all my panel members. I know we've been chatting before this session, so good afternoon once formally to each of you. I would like to also thank ASA and Ajay Sethi for organizing this whole session and getting us all together here on a very, very important topic. I think business continuity is something that is plaguing everybody now as everybody gets into the recovery mode, and not only recovery mode, okay, it's about survival and then how do you thrive from there. There has never been anything of this magnitude, at least for the last 100 years, a crisis which has hit of this magnitude over 100 years back. And this crisis has overtaken everybody. Number one, it came suddenly, it happened all of a sudden, and nobody was prepared for it, honestly, the way it came about. All the systems and processes got tested. Our supply chains were found to be wanting, especially the food supply chains were found to be wanting. Never has ever, at least in my entire working career, have I seen the entire world actually in lockdown mode. The entire world came to a lockdown. And if any of you have been following The Economist, one of the cover pages of The Economist had Planet Earth closed. And that was the reality. It was closed for a few weeks or a few months in certain cases. And so business continuity became a very, very important point because people suddenly found their businesses disappeared, their customers gone, their employees gone back to wherever they came from. And what do you do? So uh, some people, I just want to put this across. Business continuity is not crisis management. Crisis management is something different. Business continuity is a strategy in itself. It is something which is far beyond crisis management. Crisis management is one of the things, elements of business continuity. The other important point I thought came out in this is resilience came out. Companies which are resilient were able to come through, and cash actually became king. I mean, cash was so important. So people who had actually saved up cash earlier, they were not in a issue. Brand was tested. The brands of corporates got tested. Individual brands got tested. Leadership, the character of leadership came out. The true character of leaders came out during this period because it always comes out in such times. Alliances became the new norm, and even alliances with competitors, unheard of alliances, actually got formed by different people as competitors came together to say, okay, here's the market, how do we actually take advantage of it? Innovation became the norm of the day, out of box thinking. We keep hearing about it, but this actually became very, very important. Business models have all changed, as we all know. As we go back to work, business models are no more what it is. And companies are busy finding out in their own organizations who are those energy givers, because people need to be reskilled, retooled against the energy sappers or the energy takers. So the energy givers are the ones who will succeed. Communication was most critical. In fact, I was reading somewhere long back during the Afghanistan war, the American general was talking about when he never met his troops and whole number of troops all over Afghanistan, and how he used to communicate with them without even seeing them and motivating them and keeping them all charged up. I think all those things. So actually what happened is that we went back to basics. We went back to where we are. And the question comes up, is that the new normal? Is that something that we would need to look at? Moving faster, looking at new opportunities, transformation became the order of the day. And I think so we are in a position today where business continuity has become a challenge. Risk management has become more important than what it was. Risk management is already important. Let me tell you, it was always important, but it has got center stage now because of the kind of crisis we have gone through, and people's risk processes have got challenged. Cybersecurity, work from home. People have started working from home, so cybersecurity risk got thrown up. Frauds came up. We're going to discuss all these points with the expert panel that is sitting here. And with that, I would like to ask the first question, and I'll ask it of Ivan, who you've already got, who's introduced to you all. He's the group CFO of Airbus in India. So Ivan, business continuity today is a hot topic. I mean, if you have to talk of hot topics, it is the hottest topic today, business continuity in itself. Some businesses have been impacted really badly. I mean, the business in which you are in the aviation sector, the hospitality, the travel industry been badly hit. what are the 2 or 3 things that you will advise some of these companies to do going forward in their recovery process?
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, ASA, for organizing and inviting me for this seminar. You are right. I think that there are, all of us, we have been affected by this crisis professionally and personally, but there are sectors that we are suffering especially. I think that aviation is one of them, and I am not discovering anything. I can tell you that there are, in the benchmark in aviation, there were 3 big crises before this one that we were using as a benchmark. Was the 11th of September, the crisis of the previous SARS, and the financial crisis of 2008, okay? The only way to compare these 3 crises to the current one is to join all together, and still the result is less harming than the one that we have right now, okay? So it's a real disruption. And I think that it's the moment to take some actions and to reinvent yourself. I think that we have been taking many actions. I will take 3 pillars and I will give you some examples of the actions that we took, okay? So I think that one big pillar is, of course, our teams and the people. So we are all taking actions in the health and security and safety that before were not was in place. Health and safety was always very high in the priorities of the company, but now is even just simply to go to the office is an action that can have some health issues. So all the creation of crisis management teams, the awareness of the people, the put in place all the assets to allow the people to work from home as long as necessary, but also to allow the people to come back to office. We have to remember that there are business like the manufacturing that we cannot survive in working from home. We can work from home in some areas, but still the core business needs to come back to office, needs to come back to the work floor, and you need to ensure the safety. You need to give confidence to the workers, and you need to communicate correctly to them. So I think that this is one of the pillars. The second pillar that I would like to mention is the customers. Customers is the cash is king, and the way to have this cash is delivered. In the current situation, this is not easy. Many customers has difficulties, and this time is not a negotiation trick. This is a real situation. So we all know. So it's the moment to find solutions and to find the way to have a win-to-win and to support the customers for the future. In this case, I can give you one example that perhaps even you have seen in the newspapers. Airbus is even joining to Boeing, our arch rival. We are putting a lot of effort to show in the newspapers internationally that to fly safe, that the aircrafts are well equipped, that there is filters, that the flows of air inside the aircraft is making very difficult to get the virus and this. So this kind of action is the kind of activity that we can launch to support our customers. So at the end, the ones that will take benefit of this action is our customers, the airlines, but of course we are behind them, and we are the ones that will take the advantage of this. A second example is that in our process of delivery is quite difficult. It's a complex process, and at one moment it was very difficult even for the teams to get to Toulouse or to Hamburg to take the aircrafts. This was a real disruption, and was a moment in which this stopping every aircraft is $200 million, and you have it in the working capital, and you have a big problems with the cash flow. So there was implementing a system for the e-delivery. Was prepared a system to make many steps of the delivery online. This was never done before, and now it's working. I think that this crisis triggered a lot of steps in digitalization and new process that in normal circumstances will not happen, will take months or years to do. And this was done in weeks. This help a lot to the customers, help a lot to the teams, limit the physical presence of these teams in the delivery centers, and help us a lot. The third pillar is the supply chain and the suppliers. The suppliers, in our case, and I guess that in many sectors, it's not only suppliers. In many cases, are partners. I mean, they have invested. Sorry, they are producing for us specific elements that nobody else can do. And again, we know that they are suffering a lot. So we implemented a full setup of activity measures to support the suppliers. In this case, there are different actions, for different countries and for different suppliers. But the main message here is we have to take an eye in the customers, but we have to take an eye in the supply chain. So if one small supplier is suffering and cannot deliver on time, can disrupt the full production and value chain of the product. So we need to take an eye on the suppliers. We need to see how we can help them, how we can support them in these difficult times, and we cannot lose them. And this is not a kind of, it's an action for survival. I mean, if we lose one supplier that has been working with us for years and they are doing exactly what we need, we will need years to develop a new supplier. So we need really to keep these suppliers alive and to keep these suppliers running. And I think that these are the main three aspects that I would like to share with you. Okay.
Thank you, Ivan. I think you raised three important points: people, customers, suppliers. All three very critical to any organization. You could put it to another organization, you'll have the same answer. And cash is king, like you said also. So I think very good points for the audience to take part. Any questions you'll have, you can put in the chat box like you all have been told. Anand, I would like to come to you for your question. What have been your experience in dealing with an existential crisis and business continuity, and what would be the key takeaways for boards and senior management from this?
Thanks, Richard, for the question. So essentially, when you look at an existential crisis and how is it different from a regular crisis, regular crises have the kind of issues that lots of us are aware of. Existential crisis actually is a crisis where you are looking to survive tomorrow. And therefore, it is a combination of having to survive, having to deal with the crisis itself, and having to survive on a daily basis almost, or at least on a weekly basis. Now, these situations can arise in a multiple set of contexts. I'm not sure if the pandemic has resulted in an existential crisis by itself for anybody, but you will find lots of companies, at least in the last 5, 6, 10 years, have faced crises of existence, either coming out of court orders, which come out of public interest litigation, can come out of a large corporate fraud situation, can come out of bankruptcy proceedings, sometimes can come out of corruption allegations, contracts getting unilaterally cancelled by governments, and those actually bring about a large existential crisis. And the question is, how do you deal with it as senior management? Now, I have been through a bunch of different crises, but existential crises, a couple of big ones. One was in the aftermath of the 2G license cancellation by the Supreme Court, where I was working very fairly closely with a telecom operator, which was a large telecom operator at that time, no longer in India. The other one was in the context of, which is more recent, which has been in the context of a non-banking financial institution. Now, slightly different issues that arose in both of those situations in terms of crisis, the kind of laws that came into fold. But I think a significant takeaway that I had was just the need for the business to have a very quick reaction group. And we tend to put it together, but it's not, I mean, people think of dealing with it as a regular crisis as against thinking of it in terms of an existential crisis, and the needs of an existential crisis might be different. So how do you create a close working group? Who all do you put into that working group? Do you have finance people, strategy, senior management, media advisors, forensic experts, auditors, lawyers. So you get all of these guys together in one group and use it as a quick reaction group. So if anything bothers anybody, they come back to the group, everybody is informed, and the group has the ability to fairly quickly turn around a decision. And that, to my mind, Richard, was the key element when I talk about how did in both of these, or how I see other people dealing with existential crises. Now, in addition to that, you will need to deal with a whole host of contracts to be restructured. You'll need financial instruments to be restructured. You might have regulatory issues. You deal with regulatory matters. You might have courts that are in play, and various stakeholders. And the need for that sort of centralized decision making or quick reaction body is because the business operates as in different facets, and everything needs to tie into the other. So you could have a vendor or a customer come to you saying, look, this is your public position, but that doesn't work for me. And so how do you create public positions? How do you create positions in court which ultimately get reported in the media? How do you deal with governments so that there is consistency across the board in what you're doing? And the need for this consistency is so great in an existential crisis, because a small slip up somewhere can actually bring the business crashing down. And so that's really how you look at an existential crisis, different from just a normal corporate crisis, which you need to deal with, and just the need for quick reactions. This whole approach that needs a multifaceted approach where experts are not in silos, but experts begin to understand what the other experts also have to contribute. So it's not the siloed approach, but it's sort of more collective approach that comes about. Now, one of the things that I can tell you about an existential crisis is it's a roller coaster. So it's extremely exciting. And when you're in that roller coaster, you realize that once life goes back to being normal, it's going to be boring. So it almost is a little disappointing when the crisis comes to an end, but it actually triggers you in various ways. You become alive to different facets of a business, different facets of, employees to deal with. You don't think in terms of how that works when you have to talk in terms of restructuring a financial instrument. So all these sort of work hand in hand, come fit very closely together. But that's how you would look at something that's threatening just your daily existence.
Sure, Anand. I think thank you very much, and I think it is really good points for the audience, for all of us actually. I'll just supplement one small thing. You know, while people put these teams together, they made it into two teams. One was the team which was dealing with the situation on hand, like you said, with all the experts coming together, and they created a second team which was looking at new business opportunities, new ideas, new markets, because they didn't want all top senior management to be lost into just managing the current situation. Like you said, it is not a normal situation, so it requires abnormal response. And thank you for sharing it, and with good examples. Appreciate that. Nikhil, with your experience and being the person who looks after the internal audit risk management of a very large group in India, would you like to share what are the top risks one has seen during the COVID times, risk in general, and maybe anything that got more this thing during the COVID period?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Happy to provide perspective. Before that, thanks to ASA for providing me this opportunity, kind of part of this panel discussion. So, Richard, I think, and the audience, I think the way I look at it is, we talk about enterprise risk management. I think equally important is the enterprise opportunity management, right? So, I think, as they say, never waste a crisis. So, obviously, there will be risk which will obviously come through, and they will need to be mitigated and monitored. But I think it's also important to kind of look at perspective of the opportunities which that crisis throws. So, if I want to, before I get to the top one or two risks which we are seeing as important, I think the broadly I would kind of look at risk from three perspectives, right? One is an upside risk, which I think you also touched upon, and risk which provides an opportunity in today's times, whether it's around digitization, automation, and all those journeys which will bring value from a customer standpoint. The second one is a downside risk, which is obviously controllable, needs to be mitigated with the checks and balances which organization needs to put in. Regulatory non-compliances, cyber security, to some extent supply chain. And the third one is an outside risk, right? Things like COVID, natural disasters, or policies of government. So they are non-controllable, but it may have positive and negative both impacts on the organization's working. So if I want to talk a bit about top risk from a COVID standpoint, and as you mentioned that risk management is always important, but it has obviously taken an accelerated approach, and especially in today's times. So I think from my perspective, or from a perspective of how we are looking at telecom per se, I think supply chain is one risk which has been among the top priority. I think there was some geopolitical, I'm referring more from a telecom standpoint, there was always a geopolitical flavor to this with the Huawei ban and all these things happening even prior to COVID, right? But with COVID coming in, I think the whole supply chains disruptions impacted the industry in a, not only telecom, across the board, because in a way China is a supply factory for a lot of organizations. So from that perspective, supply chain would kind of come as one of the top risk, and kind of managing that in terms of either inventory management or having alternate suppliers, having your contract management, your contracts being kind of relooked at from a perspective of by the force majeure clauses or other obligations and limitations. I think that something becomes very, very key from an organizational standpoint. Obviously, it has to be a balance between cost and other aspects as well. But from a supply chain perspective, like from our company, I think some of it because of Huawei was being carried on, and it was built up more aggressively as COVID came in from a supply chain perspective. But I think from a network perspective, from a regulatory development perspective, I think it's one, you may call it a supply chain risk, but it actually is very cross-functional. It may affect network, it may affect supply chain, it may affect finance, your whole working capital situation, etc. So that's one risk I feel is been extremely important. The other one I would say is the whole cyber security. And I think some of the panelists spoke about it, though I think we always hear this cliche term, but I think it has not crystallized in the way it has crystallized in today's time. So, data privacy, cyber security with, the work from home or work from anywhere scenario, which we are currently in. And for our company perspective, I think data is gold in perspective of not only the huge volumes of data, but also in terms of sensitivity around data. We hold subscriber information, we hold call data records, we hold a lot of other things which have a lot of regulatory impact. So things like employees working from home, how hardened the systems are, how much we have kind of done from a VPN perspective or a data security perspective to ensure that there is no data leakage, the data leakage programs which we have. So I think the emphasis on all those become paramount as kind of we kind of move along this crisis. Obviously, needless to say, you have workplace employee health safety issues, which I think we have already spoken about. But if I want to put top two, I think supply chain and cyber security / data privacy in the current environment will be very important. Alongside, I think from an opportunity standpoint, with so much online presence happening, digital transformation happening, I think it's a great opportunity for organization to have their product portfolios diversified and kind of also look at other channels which lead to a great business and customer experience. So that's what I want to highlight.
Sure. Thanks, Nikhil. I think you're so right, because everybody's systems have opened up now, because you're moving to a contactless kind of environment, non-physical environment. So everything is through your system now, right? I mean, the IT systems. So the cybersecurity is definitely becoming a big one, and supply risk, like you said, And even Ivan said huge that we need to support our suppliers, we need to help them during this period. And I think your group did, or your Airtel did a great job, because the results have come out and you all have had fantastic results for this quarter. So something you did right, which during the COVID period, and you have proved everybody good. So that was a good news today, this morning, once one read it in the newspaper. KU, now coming to you, I saw one picture of the world getting crushed, and in a palm of a human being. So the customer has changed, the products have changed. How are you seeing your clients responding to this new normal that is now facing them? How are you seeing it through your experiences that you work with different companies?
Sure. Thanks, Richard, for this question. And you rightly pointed out that scenario has changed, and that's the reason we say ourselves in a new normal. So,
Yeah.
with my experience, if I see that the countries have either fully reopened or partially reopened, but more or less, the optimism level of customers remain muted. The spending level, the intent of the customer has not reached pre-crisis level. And as you rightly mentioned, Richard, that the cash is considered to be king. So each and every customer, whether it's my client or it's a normal retail customer, want to now spend with a lot of care. So the only basic need to a luxury need now shifted to only essential needs. So if I need to put the answer or my reply in a basically three-theme manner, the focus has shifted to values and essentials of the customer. The second is their theme has moved to go digital or flight to digital. And the third is the shock to loyalty. Let me explain all the three parameters. The first, when I say the focus shifted to values and essentials, customer clearly wants to see the vendor's availability, the quality, and if they see value in that, they would prefer to go with that vendor. So the coming back to the point of shock to loyalty, there are no preferred vendors available as of today. So though nobody is very loyal to their own customer or preferred vendor, whosoever is available to give me the value, give me the quality, and give me in a very digital way, where either whether it's making payment, whether it's providing services, or whether it's providing your product through a digital way where you can provide the satisfaction to the customer, that's the key. So I would summarize my entire discussion of business continuity for my client or for myself is that if we have focus towards value, focus towards essential need of the client, we have accepted the DNA of digitization in our system, which is gonna be crucial, not now, but I believe in remaining very future, that will be a core part of the system's product deliverable aspects. And the third, last but not least, your availability and providing sheer requirement of the client, which will take away their preferred vendor. So that's the answer to your question, that how customer has moved in the new normal and what they are looking at.
Correct. And I think that's why where alliances are going to come to play, and how people are going to come and take the market share. I think I like the way you have put the answer actually, and it's, I think, very unique way you have put it. I think the way I looked at it is that we have all become minimalist. I mean, more minimalist than what we were before, and now you're looking for, I like the word you said, value and essentials, and I think that is something which is going to drive. And I was talking to one company which is FMCG, and they said, this quarter we're going to do very well. I said, why? What happened? He said, we introduced new products like masks and everything to do with the COVID, and so my sales are going to go up. So people have to find new avenues. That's the way it is. The customer's needs, like you said, what is value, what is essential. Anand, let me come to you now. In your area of specialization, or one of your areas of specialization, which is fraud, I want to ask you, considering the environment in which we are living in, fraud has become a big concern for corporates, and one of the main reasons of corporate failure, and it is also one of the main reasons of corporate failure. Recent example is Wirecard, which is all over the press in Financial Times, etc. In your view, how can companies deal with frauds going forward?
So there are obviously corporate fraud, and I'm not talking about small little employee fraud.
Yeah.
There was a larger corporate fraud which result in existential crises for companies.
Yeah.
Now there are two basic players here, and all of them come from senior management. So their senior management and promoter, if it's been involved with corporate fraud, then I think their concerns are slightly different. In the sense, their concerns are how do I run away with the loot. I unfortunately have not had the opportunity to represent or advise any of those guys because, and I say unfortunate because they end up paying their lawyers a lot more. But all my experience has been on the other side. It is for the new management of the survivors or for the shareholders, and the kind of issues that crop up for new management. First is, of course, how do I continue business? Because the frauds could be of such magnitude that how do I continue business? How do I continue to be financially viable? What do I do to employee morale? What do I do to vendors? What do I do to customers? How do I deal with regulators? Because now regulators have gotten active and they are chasing me. Regulators could be SEBI, could be the SFIO, could be people like the Economic Offences Wing or the CBI or the Enforcement Directorate. So all of those guys. You then have, along with that, you have to look closely at fraud has happened. People have run away with the money, and one of the means to actually to survive is to bring back that money that people have run away with. So how do you? What sort of proceedings do you initiate? What moves do you do to actually bring back the money? Continuing business also means, and part of bringing back the money is you've got to bring in new money. So either they are new investors or they are new lenders, refinancers, and all of them have an issue with, are you going to survive or not? Why should I bring in new money into your company? Because you might cease to exist. So how do you give them that confidence? How do you undertake those negotiations? What kind of reps, warranties, indemnities that new management give? If there's a white knight, what does the white knight do in terms of what sort of support does he give? How does he speak to people? How do you then deal with third-party claims? And these are the kinds of issues that sort of come up for senior management in corporate fraud situations. They are. I don't think I know of any company that has come out of a significant fraud. I mean, Satyam being an exception, Tech Mahindra being an exception, but others are still struggling with it. Not too many have gone under on account of corporate fraud, but many are fighting it out. I think courts, regulators, everybody's begun to make the distinction between fraudsters who might have been senior management or might have been promoters at one point in time and the new management, and make the distinction, because for a third party, it's always the company did this to me. They do not make the distinction between prior management and new management. And those are the kind of issues that new management needs to deal with. That's where a lot of my time has been spent over the last few years. So it keeps you very aware of the kind of things that happen. Your heart bleeds out for the shareholders who have been robbed clean, and then how do you bring back any amount of shareholder wealth? And there is not much else. I mean, new management can't do much else other than be wary of that. I think the one key takeaway that I would say, and there are certainly unique situations for senior management to watch out for. So when corporate fraud happens, there are some guys who are actively involved with the fraud. This could include professional management. And issues for professional management is, I get an order from my boss, what do I do? How do I avoid it? Because it's either my job or I carry out orders. You have another set of senior management who says, this does not concern me, I'm going to look the other way. And I have encountered and have advised people who have said that, look, I've not participated in any fraud. Why should I be subject to prosecution? How do I get out of this prosecution? Sadly, the experience has been that you might be professional management, but the agencies and the courts are going to go after you as if you were equally culpable. And there are unfortunate situations where people are unable to come out of jail, get bail. It's because there is this prejudice, and it doesn't help to say that I was not directly involved, I got no direct benefit. And those are the sort of balances that you need to deal with. And that's what companies are facing today. That's how they are dealing with fraud going forward. I don't think they are too protective mechanisms. I think one of the categories of people that get hurt in things like this are directors or independent directors, because they have very little information, but they expose themselves to prosecution. And the only thing that I could say in terms of preventive care is to be extremely mindful. Just because you're on the board, I think the days of the old board approach is gone. Professional board members can't take the approach that I don't know and I'm not going to be liable, because in today's world, everybody is equally liable. And you have to prove on a daily basis that you're not a fraudster. It's not innocent until proven guilty. It is guilty until you on an everyday basis prove that you're innocent. And that's what professional management needs to be wary of, and therefore look at what a company does, how its businesses are running, what goes from underneath your nose, what are you going to be held liable for or responsible for in law, and look at those things very carefully. It does not help to look the other way. I mean, it doesn't help that India doesn't have a whistleblower legislation, because that's an enormous help, say in the US context or in some of the Western countries. Here you can't whistleblow. I mean, even if you do whistleblow, they've got something in textbook which doesn't work. So tough situation if you're in that context.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. Keyur, carrying on this fraud situation, and our banking sector has been very badly hit by fraud. I mean, it's there on the headlines. People have left the country, and with lots of money, etc. What are the reforms you think are required in the financial service sector to deal with this situation?
Sure, Richard. Financial service sector is very close to me, and I'm tracking it also very closely. So if I say about financial sector in India, from last couple of years, the sector is anyways looking, very negative aspects in terms of liquidity, in terms of large NPAs, of course, and then the growth is also an issue on the other side. So if I need to see with business continuity and the fraud, which will now be a key focus area for the management in financial sector, I think some of the 6 or 7 key points which comes to my mind, which should be acted as a reform or a key focus area by the management, starting with well-defined governance structure. Second, defined policies and procedures to define business policies and not the accounting policies, because the whole business policies, when you define the structured business, it defines the right outcome. The third important aspect, which I believe is about the data capturing and the consistent data capturing, because for evaluation of any kind of a risk, you need a consistent data approach and consistent data mining. The fourth is data sanctity to be preserved. The fifth one is nurturing your human capital along with the proper training, because efficient and qualified and skillful resources are key to track any kind of a fraud or to avoid them. The other aspect is, of course, the biggest road now which we're gonna see is automation. So in the financial sector, if you have a more automation drawing in line with AI or with new data analytics, the business smoothing would come very easily, and the fraud can be prevented rather than going to detection. Last but not least, well-defined automated reporting management tool, where a management get not only timely data for the evaluation of the performance or the internal control, but also in a very transparent manner, which I personally believe that this transparent manner needs to be looked by management and regulator in a very detailed and in a very close manner. So I think these are the 6 or 7 points which come to my mind very quickly, Richard, to see the reform in the banking side.
Thanks, Keyur. I think there were good suggestions there on the banking reform. I think that is very much needed in the country. I didn't talk about NBFCs, but that also needs some similar kind of, reforms there. Now moving away from fraud, because I think we have covered corporate fraud, we have covered the banking fraud. Ivan, I would like to ask you now something more on the cost side, because what has happened is we have all seen, most companies have suddenly seen, 1 quarter, maybe more than 1 quarter, revenues almost coming down to zero or coming near zero in certain cases. Revenue gone out, but cost lines have remained where they are, because many of them are fixed cost. So as the CFO, and when you are re-looking at your entire accounts and this thing, how are you re-looking at this cost? I mean, I would like to use a word, reimagine the cost line. And do you think, we keep hearing of zero budgeting? Do you think zero budgeting has now become a reality in view of the new world in which we live in, or the new normal we live in? Yeah.
Yes, I think that cost cutting, we have to divide, or at least we divide it into phases. The first one was the, let's say, the shock phase, in which many costs were frozen automatically, and we tried to decrease the cost to increase our free cash flow. There were, of course, variable costs that were adjusted, unfortunately, due to the lack of activity, but then that means also that the fixed cost increased the participation of the total cost of the company. So they became more visible, and they were more hurried to decrease it, okay? So I think that the zero budgeting, we are doing somehow of zero budgeting now. But the most important thing is that we did from the financial point of view was the awareness of the functions, okay? I think that this case, in many companies and in many groups, we have had cost-cutting programs or optimization of cost programs in the past. The difference is that in many cases, it was difficult to explain to the functions, and it was difficult to explain to the operational teams. But in this case, the crisis is so deep and is so, let's say, visible that it has been easy. And we have reduced dramatically the costs, and some of the costs that we consider in the past untouchable now are decreasing sensibly. Anyway, I think myself, I am not a fan of the cost cutting per cost cutting. Of course, we need to cut the cost, and we need to survive, and we need to stop the leaking of cash. But it's the moment also to make a good optimization of process. I mean, it's not just to have some of the cost. If you take it in an isolated way, can be a cost, and can be, you can think to cut it, but you have to see also what is the effect of this cost in the organization. Okay, I can give you one small example. We had some projects. We received the typical headquarters item that we have to cut our investment in external companies, in consultancy and this. We are doing some projects in the tax aspects of the company, and we fight strongly to keep it. And the result during the year is that we spend some thousands of dollars, and we obtain millions of dollars of savings and effects, or positive effects on the company. Okay, so in the cost cutting, we have to be careful. It's the moment to see what is the value added of this cost. And it's also the moment to take processes in the companies, like the procure to pay, the P2P, or all the internal processes that during the last years were not reviewed deeply because it was not necessary. Is the moment to make it, to optimize, and to see what are the opportunities to save cost through this optimization. Just the cost cutting per cost cutting can be dangerous and can harm the organization, not only in the current situation, but thinking in the future and in the future growth can make more difficult to the adaptation to the new world that will come after this. Okay.
I think you raised a very, very important point. I think people, when you're saying cost cutting for the sake of cost cutting is not good when you look at it there. And I think people need to distinguish between cost and investments. So they should not look at investments and say this is cost, because then you're losing exactly what you're saying. You're not building the future firm, you're not building the future organization, and you will hurt the organization in the long run for some short-term gains. Yes, you will gain in the short term because you would have saved some money, but in the long term it would have hurt the company. And I think it's good advice that when you look at cost cutting, that's why I use that word reimagine cost and say, yes, I will renegotiate with my vendors and everybody else, and I'll be tough in my negotiations, but I will be careful which ones I will cut and which I will not. So thank you very much for your input on that.
No, absolutely.
Sorry.
Just a last comment. Doesn't mean that we don't need to renegotiate the vendors and to do.
Correct.
But let's see, this is the classical approach, but it's also the moment, as you say, to make a reimagination of the process, make a review of what is the effect of this cost and what is the value added of this cost. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, that was very useful. Nikhil, now coming to you, your group is known, at least through all my experiences, one of the best in internal audit and some really good processes. And I think maybe it may be a good place where you can, because when you already had a very, very high quality internal audit process going on, one of the best in the country, I would say. What are the key changes you think that is being made in the internal audit landscape, considering the COVID times and also the new times which even came before COVID, I would say. I would not exactly talk COVID. Even before COVID, we were seeing a lot of changes coming in. COVID only further heightened it or accelerated it further. So what are the changes you're seeing coming in internal audit or the approach to internal audit?
Yeah, Richard, thanks. Happy to provide some perspective. So I think from an internal audit standpoint, as an independent assurance function with its responsibility to the board, to other stakeholders, I think one thing we have actually done at our group is, in addition to that, the control and the compliance agenda which we have, we've also kind of looked at certain things which are very, very business specific. So when we have a overall strategy for the company, obviously we don't decide the strategy, but one thing we can partner with the business is to kind of look at the strategy element and ensure those are run within the policies, procedures, and they are timely tracked, and whatever we were set out to achieve, we have achieved. So basically, we have kind of, I would say, segregated our work into obviously independent assurance, control checks, balances, and also partnering with the business where we can participate with them on certain transformational projects, and more do kind of design reviews before the projects are implemented, so that I don't come and audit later and say 6 months down the line, you had 20 gaps which you could have plugged at a possibly a UAT stage or a conceptualization stage itself. So that's one thing. That's not a COVID thing, but that's a general approach which we follow, which has helped us because obviously at the end of the day, we are all working together for the control environment. The other thing which we have done specifically for COVID, Richard, is more for looking at agile approach, right? Typically, we have a quarterly audit plan. We report at the end of the quarter, but here we are looking in different times. So, you know, if I know something which can be improved today, either from a digitization standpoint or a standpoint of making things better from a customer-centric processes, I try to do a fortnightly update to my executive committee and say, these are the things which have come out, closed loop, these are the things you can start implementing, rather than saying quarterly down the line, I'll update the board, then you kind of put a remediation plan and I'll track actions. The other thing which we have done is, obviously in these times, we can't visit the warehouses, the stores, etc. Obviously, very, very obviously. We put some digitization in basic stuff. We take camera feeds from stores, warehouses, and kind of put some analytics around it so that we get some outlier themes, and if there's anything which needs a deep dive, we can do that. The other thing very quickly is, I mean, everybody has adopted continuous controls monitoring as a key measure these times. So I think we designed some specific tests during these times from a COVID perspective, whether it's around large value payments, around any DOA violations, or any other test which would be more specific around some fraud connotations as well, and run this on a more continuous basis, red flagged, discussed with management. It's more about continuous improvement than having a lot of lag before we do a post-mortem later. So that some of the approaches is a combination adjusted for COVID or otherwise, we as a team do. Obviously, internal auditors are not popular people, so we always want to improve in terms of adding value and, you know, all the cliche terms. But I think my perspective is, obviously adding value is important, but it's very, very important to preserve what we have created for the organization in all these years. So it has to be the right balance. So that's from my side.
And it must be further compounded now, Nikhil, with the social distancing and the less social interaction one has. Even those few times when you could have patted him on the back and said, okay, good job done. Now you have to say it through an email or a whatever, Teams call or whatever call. But I think it's some very good points you spoke about, proactiveness, going and talking about it before, because it is not that person's problem. It is the company's issue. And then when you partner, when internal audit partners, I think it becomes a successful project because it's about resolving the issue and not about finger pointing. I think that's a very, for people who are listening, and this is a very proactive way of doing internal audit, because this way you also gain the respect of the auditee, because he will be more open to you. When you go and talk to them, they will disclose more things because they know here's a friend who's come to help me also. There are two parts of the job. One is where you are helping and the other is policing. They both have their roles and they can be done separately and they don't need to be confused with each other. So thanks, Nikhil, for sharing. And like, I'm a big fan of your internal audit group, the way you all do the internal audit. I think it's done very well, considering that your chairman also gets personally involved in those meetings, in some of those meetings. I know it because I was part of it at some point of time. But Keyur, I'm just to take on from internal audit now to internal controls, because each one is one line of defense when we talk of this thing. What aspects of the internal control environment should companies focus on as they rely on remote workforce? Nikhil spoke about remote, you can't go there. So what are the internal controls now that people need to relook at now in a more focused manner?
Sure. So Richard, when we are talking about work from home, so of course people are not physically meeting. So you have to have some kind of a collaboration tool where people can jointly discuss, get reviews done, and they have a joint platform. So important aspect is you should have to have a collaboration tool. The second point is there have to have a controlled environment. So the entire policies from moving from manual controls to IT controls need to be shifted smoothly, so that the entire process or the internal business cycles or operating cycles can run smoothly. The third is data privacy. Because of work from home, your system should be adhered to have a full control on your data privacy. Let me give you some of the practical examples what I've seen to our client. Because of this pandemic, companies wanted to save cash. They wanted to, because of the pressure on building the profitability and seeing the economy going toward the downside, there are many job cuts, and we have observed that. Now the job cuts was an easy task to achieve to your goal, but at that same point of time, the manual controls moving to IT controls, the important segregation of duties, the secrecy of data should not go to a computer by those employees should have been taken care very well, which I believe somewhere many organizations have not taken care of this part, which is the most important aspect. So taking this to the next point is not only data privacy, but also your IT cyber security, which is one of the important aspects. And we are seeing on media nowadays that so many cases of cyber securities are coming down, and the lawyers are really fighting to that aspects. So just to summarize the entire work from home situations, we can very well deal with it. Companies are doing it, but I think fourth thing one has to take care. One is controlled environment. The second is collaboration tool. Third is data privacy, and fourth is IT cyber securities. If you take care of this part, you allocate your segregations of duty and take care of the manual control to IT control, I guess we are in the safe end.
Okay, thanks, Keyur. I think cybersecurity has come up very often. Ivan, can I ask you, how do you, because you have been doing cybersecurity in your earlier avatar and you were involved in a lot of things around it. Would you like to throw some light on this cybersecurity, because it's become a big risk? I completely agree with Keyur. Recently, we had one big pharma company which had a cyber attack on its systems, and I know as KPMG, we are so scared that 155 countries you operate in, the most vulnerable country can actually infiltrate your system. So one is to make sure that you are secured, and work from home has only enhanced this because you have not taken it into the homes of people. So any light you would like to throw on this?
So I can share with you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, my own experience, because during the lockdown period, I mean, the company is very aware of this cyber risk. It's not now; it's a long shot already. But during the lockdown, during all the last months, what we observe is that the cyber security, the cyber attacks were increasing. But I can give you one example of what kind of cyber attack we suffer and what are the mitigation that we took, because when we are thinking in cyber attack, perhaps we are thinking in complex tools that they are introducing in our computers and they're stealing. It's not the case that we suffer. So what we suffer in many, not only in many countries, what we suffer is the situation that we were receiving emails reproducing exactly the invoices and communications from suppliers and asking for fast payments of some invoices. This, in normal circumstances, there is a risk that this can go through our normal controls, but when the people is working from home and is not in the office and they just need to get an approval of a payment that for them is business as usual because there is nothing strange, the situation gets much more dangerous. Of course, normally what they are asking is a small change, obviously the bank account. And if we are not aware of this, and if we don't take care of this, we are paying, and we discover days later or weeks later, because the supplier, of course, come back to us and ask for what happened with the payment. This is it's also a case of cybersecurity. It's very dirty. It's very dangerous for the finance teams, because then you have to call to the police. You have to. I mean, it's really it's not a simple issue. And we launched a campaign globally to mitigate this. That is simply to get communication with employees, with the financial teams, but not only, with all the procurement teams and with all the teams involved on this. And the situation is so simple that every time that we receive some changes from a normal supplier or a normal partner, we need to double check by phone with our point of contact and to solve it. I mean, I want to share this example because perhaps it's not a cool cyber security issue, but it's an issue that is on the table. It's an issue that is growing very much. And we have to take, again, globally. I'm not talking about India. We were having these cases in many countries. And this we have to take an action globally to stop it and to make awareness sessions with all the teams that will participate in the process of procure to pay.
Okay. So we're getting some questions from the audience, and one of the questions that I would like to put up, because I know we're running out of time also, and maybe between Keyur and Ivan, even Anand, if you want to answer this one, basically it's saying, considering increased dependence on IT security experts with regard to cyber security, what steps must an organization take to ensure controls over the structure development by such vendors? So basically talking of vendors who are now open to your payment system, what kind of controls we need to put in place? Because now they got access to our systems, right? Can they breach our systems? Can they get in? So is there anybody, Ivan, would you like to give an answer on this one? On basically they are saying, the question is that vendors now getting onto your system, what kind of cyber security controls, IT security controls we need to put in place?
I am not a techie guy, so I cannot give you the technical
Sure.
aspects. I can give you
Sure.
more the human aspects, okay?
Sure.
I think that
Yes. Sure.
what is very important in all this, from my point of view, is very important is the awareness of the teams, okay? In all this, we are more and more concerned about the IT security. We have to have a clear segregation of duties. We have to have a process that has 4 eyes, and if necessary, 6 eyes on the same item. We have to double check all the payments. We have to double check all the actions that we are launching. And we have, from my point of view, the most important is to have the team fully aware and fully trained. I mean, really on track that this is a huge threat, that this is growing, and that this is not a minor issue. This is what I can add about this question. Okay.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Ivan.
Richard,
yeah.
Richard, if you want, I may just add a couple of points to what one mentioned. Yeah,
Sure.
so see, it's a very beautiful questions, and I think there are two parameters which one may need to take care. One is the dependency of the wall. Basically, you don't allow any external agencies or a vendor to enter to your database. There has to be a separate room where you can have an access and the external vendor can have an access, so that it does not get an access to your entire database. So that's the first
You create a
primary.
firewall.
Yeah, that's a dependency wall which you need to create. And then second, there must be an internal risk control parameters in terms of the access has to be given, and the approval stage is only be approved if there are 2 or 3 limited checks to be done by a different individuals on an auto mode. So it's if say example, if I have to make a payment to some vendor, either a finance team and an admin team is a very well secured controls, which one may ask by entering into two function put together rather than allowing one department to function it together. So that way you can create a separate risk control matrix and the separate wall to address some of the IT issues.
Sure. Thank you, Keyur. It was very useful. Thanks for that. Nikhil, can I just ask you one small question has come up? I thought I'll ask you this. Should internal auditors still focus on value addition, or should provide assurance against business risk in such times of crisis? The question comes from the audience.
Yeah. Happy to take that. I think I've touched upon it a bit when I spoke. So I would say, obviously, in these times, the approach needs to change. Obviously, you need to partner with the business to make sure all the initiatives they are taking, the controls, checks, and balances within those initiatives are being properly built in, whether it's work from home, whether it's around cyber security, or whether it's around segregation of duties, because I think it's very important for these to be very tightened up extensively as we work from home scenario. I think just to be more specific, I think even if we do what we are doing in the things which I have highlighted, I think in some way or shape we are adding value, right? So I think that value addition can be done, irrespective of whether you are supporting the business or you are doing independent assurance and kind of reporting to the stakeholders of the board. So I think from a value addition perspective, it's just about how you approach the situation, how you define controls, checks, balances, because at this point in time, obviously business risk takes priority, and we should make sure we kind of collaborate more importantly with the business rather than work in silo. And hence it's very, very important to have an integrated approach towards then enhancing the control environment, where internal audit should participate along with the business and ensure in these times the checks, balances, and which needs to be put in are put in more proactively than doing an audit later and coming back. So I think that's my 2 cents to it.
Sure. Thanks, Nikhil. I think we have completely run out even of our extended time. We are 10 minutes over the clock. And I think I had one more question for each of you, but I'm sorry, I'll not be able to ask it. And there are some more in the chat window, which we cannot answer. I think ASA will take this thing of sending you answers later on. I would just like to end this one thing, because the one thing that came out during this whole COVID period was the human aspect of everything, the human aspect of everything. I would like to end with one quote of Helen Keeler, of whom I'm a big fan of. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. With this, I would like to hand over to Gaurav to close the session. Thank you. Thank you, panel members.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, on behalf of ASA, I would like to extend my deepest thanks and appreciation to our excellent chair, Richard, and our stellar panelists, Anand, Evan, Nikhil, and Keyur. Thank you for all of the thought that you put in for this and the experience that you shared with us today that together made an excellent discussion. Thanks a lot for that. A few takeaways quickly for today's session. So as far as the business continuity is concerned, companies need to ensure strengthening their 3 pillars and build in the resilience there. That's their people, customer, and supply chain. The next is be aware of your business functions and impact of your actions on your key operations. So what are the impacts which are there on the key operations? As far as the internal audit function is concerned, so one has to use this IA function to look at business strategy elements and to partner with the business. So, and along with that, also to do a continuous process checks, use of data analytics and digitization to optimize cost and build in efficiencies around the processes. Also, as Anand said, we need to build up our teams by having experts, internal auditors, forensic auditors who have to work together now and ensuring the consistency across the board. Focus has to be on the cybersecurity now while digitizing your operations and processes. And one has to have a well-defined management reporting tool to highlight any gaps. I would also like to thank now the ASA team for putting together this event and this series. Manoj for ensuring the smooth rollout for this series, and Kim for her support in organizing today's panel discussion. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who attended today for taking their time out and joining us on this session. If there are any further questions, please email them to us and we will get back to you. We'll be sending across a summary of the points discussed along with a recording of this session by tomorrow. Please join us next week on Wednesday, November 4th at 3 p.m. for the next panel discussion on rethinking your business model. We wish everyone a safe time ahead. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks again for your time and for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Bye.